speeds. See, Ayrton, thank you for starting the recording there. Quick introduction for myself. My name is Matt Cate. I'm the director of the Tennessee Transportation Assistance Program, and on behalf of all of my colleagues here at the UT Center for Transportation Research, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. So as we get started, a couple of housekeeping things that I would like to cover with everybody. And I see some of you are already know the drill here, but Ayrton, if you could bring that housekeeping slide up for us, great. So a couple things here. So for those of you who haven't been through one of the TTAP workshops before, we do track attendance via the chat box. Entering your name and organization down there in the chat box helps us match your Zoom username to your true identity. That's especially helpful as we're trying to figure out who has earned their professional development hours and needs to receive a certificate for completing the workshop. So, sometimes we can make a match without that, but particularly for folks at TDOT, I think by default you show up with a JJ number as a username. We don't have access to the list that pairs that with your name. So please do that. In terms of interaction today, so we're going to primarily use the chat box for questions, and we may have some opportunities where Tim, our instructor, would like to open things up, open mics and open cameras. But for the most part, let's use the chat box. Ayrton and I will be monitoring. If we see anything that looks like it needs an immediate response for clarification, we'll try to jump in and pose that question at the first chance we have. We may save some of those questions for the end of the sections as we go through material today. Also, just to kind of keep things moving along smoothly, if you would please leave your camera off and your microphone muted. That would help us as well. Also, you probably saw the same message pop up that I saw when Ayrton hit the record button, but we are recording today's sessions to be posted on our YouTube channel. So just keep that in mind. If you've got a sensitive scenario that you've got a question about, if you think you're exposing yourself to any liability or there's something you don't want everybody else to know, maybe save that for a conversation between sessions later today or maybe after the workshop concludes. We'll be happy to help you out, put you in touch with Tim if need be, or maybe Ayrton and I can provide some assistance as well. PDH certificates, as I said, we are going to use the data we get out of Zoom to track everybody's participation. Those that have hit the minimum number of minutes or hours that we've set, and typically I think, Ayrton, it's 90% of the session is the first pass. Everybody hitting that mark will receive their certificates via email no later than 2 weeks from today. Hopefully it will be sooner than that, but it does take a little time to compile that information. And then finally, we did get a second email out to everybody this morning with a download link for the handout materials and slides for the workshop. Some of you may not have seen that already. If you did receive that first message with a Zoom link, please check your spam folder or quarantine folder, depending on your email provider, to see if our message is wound up there. And Ayrton, maybe one of us should drop that download link in the chat box as the sign-in activity slows down a little bit. So I think that's it for the housekeeping. So as we get things started here today, a couple of people want to acknowledge. Of course, one is our instructor, Tim Taylor, and I'll provide a little bit more introduction for Tim. But the first person I want to ask to say a few things for us is Jessica Rich. And Jessica is the safety engineer in Federal Highway Administration's Tennessee Division Office in Nashville. Jessica has been a great partner and supporter of TTAP over the years. We've done a lot with her. She's done a lot of great things to improve roadway safety here in Tennessee, and this workshop wouldn't be happening today without her help. So Jessica, if you've got a few things for us, the floor is yours. And are you able to talk? I may have to find you in the list and unmute you if we have not changed that setting. Well,
Looks like she's having some issues, Matt. I think she just dropped out and gonna come back in.
Okay. Okay. Well, with that, then I'll go ahead and make your intro, Tim. And if Jessica comes in, maybe between modules, we can have her share a few comments. Oh, there she is. Hey.
I haven't been talking. Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I will start again. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for attending today's workshop. The Safe System approach is part of the or the safe speeds, the safe speeds element that you're going to learn about these next couple of days is part of the Safe System approach that the Secretary of Transportation is and all of Federal Highway Administration is behind to help us build redundancy in our safe system or in our transportation system. And I'm sure Tim will go over the different elements of the safe system approach, but there are 6 principles that I just wanted to talk about. Death and serious injuries are unacceptable, as we all know. And then humans make mistakes and humans are vulnerable. Responsibility is shared, and that's among all of the different elements of the safe system approach. Safety is proactive and redundancy is crucial. And so what we're learning about with the safe speeds element of this, because there are 5 other parts of it, is just figuring out ways to make our system more robust. And so I thank you, Tim, for helping us with this class. Thank you, everyone, for attending today, because without you, we will need to, or without you, we can't get these fatalities and serious injury numbers down. So I will turn it over either to Matt or to Tim.
All right, I'll jump in. Thanks, Jessica. So a couple of things before I hand things over to Tim. So I just want to say, this is an issue that for me personally, I think has been a frustrating one. We do provide technical assistance to our cities and counties here in Tennessee through TTAP, and a lot of the requests we receive deal with excessive speed, or either directly, maybe as a result of complaints from citizens, or indirectly, maybe we're seeing some of the negative effects of speed in terms of crashes or other problems related to speed. But it's one where I don't feel like we've had a lot of great solutions to the problem. We see widespread complaints about speed. We've had some guidance in the engineering industry, transportation engineering industry, but I would call it very loose guidance for the most part. And I feel like that folks are frequently dissatisfied with the end result of a quote by the book engineering analysis and study of speeds on these roadways. So I'm hopeful that Tim can shed some light on some of the reasons for that, and maybe steer us in the right direction. And I think it's great timing that the safe speeds and safe system approach is coming online and is going to get a lot more attention as we move forward. So with that, I'll make a very, very quick introduction to Tim and turn the floor over to him. So Tim has been with Federal Highway Administration for the last 12 years. He's currently a senior highway safety engineer and is part of FHWA's safety and design team. Prior to joining FHWA, Tim was with the Alabama Department of Transportation. And between those two organizations, Tim's got a lot of committee experience at the national level, representing both organizations. So feel very fortunate to have Tim with us today. So Tim Taylor, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that introduction. And based on your comments, I guess the only thing I think you left out was providing the white horse for me to ride in on to solve all these speeding problems. So, but no, I appreciate the introduction, and Jessica as well. Appreciate your words getting us started. So, welcome. I know we've got a huge crowd out there. I've just been looking at the chat box and looking at all the different states that are represented. It's pretty overwhelming that we've got the Tennessee LTAP has that great of a reach into all these different nooks and crannies of the eastern, I guess, Appalachian area. But we've got a great group, and looking forward to it. I tell you, this is one of the tougher areas I think there is to deal with as an engineer, transportation planner, designer, traffic engineer. No matter your title, if you're involved in speed management or speed related issues, you've got your work cut out for you. And you know what Matt has described there, as far as, you know, at times being frustrating and you know, not many solutions. That is, I echo some of that same sentiment. It's not a problem that's going to be solved overnight. It's not a problem that's going to be solved next month or next year. It's going to take a concerted effort, and as Jessica mentioned, a shared responsibility. And I think a lot of it revolves around a shared new collaboration of individuals involved in speed, getting designers together with the traffic engineers and the planners with the maintenance folks, and getting, I think, less stovepiping. I think we can achieve some results. But again, they're going to be incremental. But not to be discouraged by any point, there is success to be found in incremental reductions in speed. And together with looking at complete streets and the concepts there of making the roads safe and accessible for all road users, I think we can begin moving in the right direction. If we keep doing things the way we've done in the last 50 years, though, I don't think we're going to see a lot of progress. So it is going to have to be a paradigm shift, if you will, using the many concepts and tools that are out there now related to both safe systems, complete streets, context sensitive based design. All of these things add to the toolbox of dealing with speed. And again, it's a big toolbox. You better come prepared with a big toolbox, and or else you're not going to see those even those incremental improvements in safety of our roadways. So with that, let's get into things a little bit. Just a few housekeeping things in addition to what Matt has mentioned. The materials that were sent out includes the agenda and basically session A. So tomorrow there'll be another handout for session B. This is a unique course in that it's really not built around the NHI. There is an NHI speed management course. It's in the process of being updated. So there's really no, I guess, right word wouldn't be certified, but there's really no specific course on speed management at the present time. As I said, the NHI course is being revised. So I think there is definitely a renewed interest in speed and speed related issues. For one reason, I think we all are aware that speeds have gone up over the last year or two. I commute a lot on I-65 between Birmingham and my home. And I know you guys deal with, 65 and other interstates, particularly in Tennessee. 65 splits the state in two. And I'm sure you guys are seeing a lot of the same things on your different corridors, whether it's, 24, 40, 65, no matter what the route is, arterial routes, with no control of access, that speeds are up pretty much everywhere. I'd say, just on my observation, it could be 5 or 10 miles per hour or more from what it was just 2 or 3 years ago. The reasons for that are, we could get into a discussion about that, but it's something that we have got to start addressing. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see fatalities and severe injuries increase if we don't. So it's not a time to stick our head in the sand by any stretch. So with the agenda, I'm just going to say that I hope to cover modules 1 through 4 today. We may get into part of 5. So again, the agenda is going to be somewhat fluid, and then we'll come back tomorrow again at 10 o'clock. And as far as the time that we would adjourn, I expect it to be around 12:30. It may be a little bit sooner both days, but certainly we won't run over. So with that, I'm trying to think, is there any other housekeeping details? I would encourage you to use the chat. I'll be able to see, those things as they pop in. And then we're also going to be using Microsoft Forms to get some feedback. And a group this large, over 100 people. Ideally, we would have an exercise, an intersection exercise, where we go through and look at different aspects of the intersection as far as speed issues. It's difficult to do that with the size of a crowd, but we are going to try to do that in a more limited, I guess, way. But again, I think there'll be some value that we can gain from that. So with those few words, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the presentation, and I'm going to start off with just an introduction into the speeding problem and where all that, the scope of the problem, the size of the problem, and what we have to deal with in regards to speeding issues. So hopefully, at the end of tomorrow, assuming you're going to be here for both rounds, session A and B, here's some things we want to cover and make sure we get to. And that is, we want to define some key terms related to speed and speeding, including roadway departures, intersections of pedestrian bicycles. Now, you're probably wondering, well, why is roadway departures, intersection of pedestrian bicycles included? Well, those are some key focus areas. And as a general rule, if you look at your roadway departure crashes, your intersection crashes, and then those with peds and bicyclists, you've accounted for about 80 to 90% of your crashes in most jurisdictions. Now, it's going to vary a little bit from, urban to rural to, different states. But as a general rule, that's the bulk of your focus areas that you need to, be given attention to. So those are paramount in terms of addressing speed-related crashes and injuries. We're going to look at how speed limits are set and regulated in a general sense, but then we're also going to look at some specifics to Tennessee related to the Tennessee laws. And if you're from Virginia, North Carolina, Alabama, or one of the other states represented here with some of the participants, you can just kind of focus in on some of the general things we'll be covering in terms of how speed limits are typically set. We're going to talk about some of the advances in setting speed limits, apart from the full reliance on the 85th percentile speed. If there's any controversy, I guess, within this whole realm of speed setting and speed limits and design speed, whatever, it's not so much with the designers and the traffic engineers with setting the, what the speed's actually going to be, but it's on whether or not an agency is going to rely exclusively on the 85th percentile speed as a basis for setting speed limits, or are other considerations or factors going to be included. That's where a lot of the rub is in this whole concept of attaining reasonable and self-enforcing speeds. So we're gonna dive into that a little bit. We're also going to be discussing a little bit about the notice of proposed amendments that came out with the for the 11th edition of the METCD. So we're expecting some changes related to that section in, I think it's 2B13 of the METCD. We're going to look about a little bit at the role of stakeholders and the other E's besides engineering. And we're going to talk about some speed management countermeasures, what you can do to facilitate reductions in speed and downward trends in speed, as opposed to watching them continually go up, at least over the last 2 or 3 years. And we're going to also delve into some of the information and resources that are out there. So in this first module, what I want to do is just talk about the speed problem, and probably doesn't need a lot of description, but we're going to go into a few of the details if there are any doubters out there about the impact of speed on crash severity and fatalities. We're going to talk about just overall help you to understand the course logistics, where we're going, where we're headed. I've kind of talked about that a little bit in with the agenda, but certainly expectations were covered that as far as the being in the objectives in the previous slide. I'm going to talk about the need for a comprehensive approach for attaining safe speeds. And again, it's comprehensive, it's collaborative, it's doing things differently from the way we've done them in the past. I guess a short disclaimer of sorts, if you would just look at this, and I'm not going to read through it, just give you an opportunity to look at this and digest that before we move forward. All right, so one thing I'll just add to that, just to emphasize that there are a lot of different aspects of speed, speed types, speed terms, speed setting that we're not going to cover, and those are advisory speed. Any type of warning speed or advisory speed, we're not going to cover that. We're not going to really talk about variable speed in terms of enforcement and automated speed enforcement, nor are we going to look at speeds that are specific to work zones or construction zone speed limit. So that's kind of a whole nother animal, and that really doesn't represent the bulk of the speed management challenges that we have in front of us. Not to say that there aren't issues with work zone speed limits, there are. I certainly know of they tend to be, for liability reasons, they tend to be, much lower than than a reasonable or prudent speed. So there are issues with these different things. It's just that due to the sake of time, we're not going to delve into those. So if you look at the speeding and roadway fatalities, generally the percent that are speed related has somewhat stayed fairly flat, but this again looks at the from 2003 to 2012. So remaining relatively flat over that time period. Total fatalities, we've seen a dip in those going back to, that time period from 2010 to 2012, we saw a little bit of a dip. However, that has not held true to present. In 2014, there were over 9,000 or 28% of all fatalities were a result of speed-related crashes. And the numbers are even higher now. I want to just point out some interesting things that came out of a strategic safety plan that was conducted by Hawaii DOT. And they found in terms of age groups and speeding that the top 3 age groups with the highest percentage of fatalities was, no surprise here, 21 to 25-year-olds were the highest in terms of fatalities. The next group, 15 to 20-year-olds, was second highest, and then the also a fairly young group, the 26 to 30-year-olds was 12.2%. So you can see that there is a overrepresentation, if you will, of fatalities amongst the when you compare it to the population, the fatalities amongst this younger age group, 30 and under. Top 3 age groups with the lowest percentage of fatalities is surprisingly the 71 to 75-year-olds. Now, there are reasons for that, as we can probably think of. Well, this group may be out on the road less. Maybe they're out on the road less at night. But then you also have the 66 to 70 group, 2.3, and then the 61 to 64 group of 4.0. So probably underrepresentation here, but again, it's these numbers are certainly related to exposure and other elements of an aging population who are more likely to use other means of transportation, whether it's transit or walking, different things of that nature. If you look at the age groups and speeding, they come from the different overall Hawaii and then Honolulu, and then the different a couple of the different islands there. From 2013 to 2017, you can see the drivers involved in fatal crashes was much higher in this group in Honolulu, where the speeds were surprisingly lower speeds to 25 to 35 mile per hour group. So that's a little bit of a, I think of a general misconception, is that we tend to think of fatalities and severe injuries of occurring at higher speeds, but they don't necessarily, relate to the those doesn't bear out in terms of severity of crashes and fatalities. Some more information, about 10% of the speed-related crashes were major crashes. About 52% of the speed-related were lane departure. So there you go. You're going to see you're going to see lane departure, intersection, and pedestrian and bicycle pop up quite often when it comes to speed-related crashes and the percentage of the total crashes that those entail. So if you're not familiar with lane departure is basically leaving your travel lane, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, whenever you cross the center line or edge line. Now, a lane departure crash, you can still have a crash if you're just changing from one lane to another, going in the same direction, if you're crossing a lane line. But in terms of how these are characterized, a lane change from one lane to another going in the same direction where you're crossing a broken line or something of that nature is not considered a lane departure. So lane departure crashes typically involve things such as if you're on two-way road, it could be head-on collision, it could be running off the road, overturning, side swipe there would be moving in the same direction, but that's technically not a lane departure type crash. And then the single vehicle run off the road could be overturned, struck a fixed object, etc. Typically, loss of control is primary cause of the crash, and that's true wherever you're, particularly like with edge drop-offs. Edge drop-offs are problematic for motorists if they run off the road. Typically, trying to get back up onto the road can create a overcorrection and a sometimes violent type of crash or severe type of crash wherever they're crossing a center line on a two-lane road. So these are lane departure type crashes that are most common with whenever a lane departure occurs. And if we look at the FARS data, we can see that the percent speeding that are involved in crashes is 20% for passenger cars. For motorcycles, it's 33% are involved in speeding. So two bigger categories would be the motorcycle and the passenger cars. And this other group makes up 23% as well. So that would be those that aren't covered in this these four items here. And then again, this comes from the FARS data. When you look at different roadway types, the percent speeding is somewhat of a, I guess, surprise. If you look at it, you think local roads, you think of those being, lower speed, folks not needing to get someplace in a hurry, and there's just not that big push for moving from point A to point B on a local road as quickly as you might on a principal arterial or freeway. But surprisingly, the percent speeding is fairly high compared to those other routes that would have heavier traffic, more volume. If you look at the percent of fatal crashes by speed limit, then you can see that the speed limit group from less than 25 has fatal crashes of 36.5%, but of all crashes, it's only 8.6%. So again, this is just some information that comes from FARS related to the kind of the breakdown, kind of dissecting the data on where the different crashes are coming from, who's involved, and what type of routes they're typically are occurring on. Public perceptions about speeding. Most of us think that on freeways that speeding is prevalent. That's not surprising. The faster speeds, I guess I can't think of any roadways we have in this country where speeds are higher, unless it's a tollway or something. I know there are certain toll facilities where speed limits are even posted higher than the 70 miles per hour, which is generally I guess about the average. You look at all the average of speeds posting on freeways, average would be about 70 miles per hour. But there are certainly some that are posted even higher. But speeding is commonly, people just expect that there's going to be a lot of speeding on freeways whenever they're using freeways. Most people would say that speeding in residential zone is unacceptable, but frequently the same people that are saying it's unacceptable are the ones that are speeding. The people that are calling for the police to set up, driver feedback signs or more police presence on their roadways are commonly the ones that are actually, speeding themselves, even though they want traffic to slow down. If you're driving 10 miles over the speed limit, then most people consider that to be acceptable. If you go higher than that, then it becomes less acceptable. But on average, people think that if they're driving 7 to 10 miles per hour over the speed limit, they're not very likely to be ticketed, and that's acceptable. Particularly if that happens to be a pace type speed on the particular roadway. And then a lot of drivers think it's certainly unacceptable to speed through a school zone. That's fairly common and understood. This comes from the an NCHRP report, but I think it's interesting as we kind of want to make a shift later on this morning into road design variables and their effect on operating and speed crashes. You can see from the this is just a chart that has different categories listed out, and then if the arrow is pointing up, then there's an increase in speed as that particular attribute increases. And similarly with the so this shows both urban operating speed and urban crash frequency, along with the rural operating speed and the rural crash frequency. So naturally, as AAD goes up, then we would say, okay, there's going to be a mixed effect. But if you look at the rural crash frequency, there's an increase. So maybe posting of a new speed limit sign may have an impact on the operating speed. It may not, but we know that the volume is going to have an impact on the crash frequency. As percent trucks go up, you can see that, there is going to be an increase in operating speed, but there's also going to be an increase in crash frequency. So this just gives you some feel for the different variables along our roadway, the surroundings, roadway geometry, traffic control devices, et cetera, and their impact on speed based on this research that came out of the NCHRP report 966. And we'll be going into that in more detail in session 5, actually, when we come back and revisit this particular information coming from 966. Any speed management program has to look at all the E's. And of course, we know what those are: engineering, enforcement, education, and then emergency medical services. It's interesting, though, and just talking with different people, now there's like thinking that we really don't need education so much. A lot of us think that, well, we're educated enough, or we should know based on our experience and driver's handbook and all the other systems we have in place for education. Really what we need is not more education. What we need is a little encouragement to do that. And how you do that would come maybe in different ways, but maybe it's time to replace education with more encouragement. Exactly what that means, that's probably topic for more discussion. There are a number of resources out there. These aren't necessarily all up to date, but the Speed Management Program Plan comes from NHTSA in 2014, and it basically shows an integration approach to speed management and 6 different focus areas, such as data, engineering, enforcement, education, technology, and research. So really, just from that alone, the focus area of a program looking at data and engineering and enforcement, education, you know, technology is really going to become more of a, I think, a solution as we move forward. It's not just going to be this safe systems approach per se, but technology is advancing so rapidly, and the need to put in checks and you know, safety checks along with whether it's, you know, your car won't start unless you pass the breath test, you know, blood, and it's all these things that are coming on board with the new technology and vehicles that's, I think, going to change things. Of course, legislative is really not even included in there in those 6 focus areas, but certainly legislation would be a part of enforcement, education, and technology. There are 24 objectives and 71 key actions. This too tells you the scope and size of the problem. It's not something that we just, okay, we have a couple of objectives and about, you know, 4 or 5 key actions. Sometimes it's sometimes simple is better, and less complex is better. So maybe we don't need to be looking at 71 key actions. You have to start somewhere. So maybe fewer key actions could be a good rule of thumb. I like this the best. It came out of the 966 report. If traffic engineers could actually achieve desired operating speeds merely by setting and posting speed limits, then their work would be done. How true, but we all know it's not that easy. But if it was that easy, then we could just dismiss class right now and go back to our jobs and just post new speed limits, and we could solve the problem of speeding on our nation's highways. Well, if you've done any posting of speed limits or any speed studies, you certainly know that that's not true. And if you're involved in speed related issues in any form or fashion, you probably would not be surprised by that statement. Some of the program attributes that comes from the NHTSA research is that it needs to be data driven. The program has to be data driven. You have to apply road design and traffic operations and safety measures and set appropriate speed limits that are safe. Targeted enforcement efforts are what's needed, not just random here, there, or everywhere. I live not too far away from a 4-lane US divided highway. It's about, I'd say about a mile from my house. I frequently see the city police enforcing the 55 mile per hour speed on that particular US highway. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to the enforcement of the speed, other than one observation I've made is that on in-state college football weekends, there tends to be more enforcement of the speed on that particular roadway. Now, I don't know if more crashes are occurring during that time, both before and after those games. People are commuting across from one side of the state to the other, but that's an example of probably where it's not a data-driven, targeted type of enforcement. it's targeted, but it's not targeted based on data related to crash severity or fatalities. And if you're just wondering why I threw that in there, no, I've never been ticketed for doing excessive speeding on that particular roadway. Effectively using media and marketing. This is a big one. Things nowadays with social media, being able to reach so many of that younger group, that 30 and under group particularly, that uses different social media, I think that could be a huge plus. And then cooperation of all traffic safety stakeholders. This is huge. It's difficult sometimes for us within our own agencies to have cooperation and collaboration. But once you get outside the department, it becomes even more of a challenge to just find really the time and the personnel to address the different issues and to even meet with stakeholders and discuss and plan what should be done, what needs to be done. Countermeasures can and should include not simply roadway features or new or upgraded traffic control devices, but also enforcement encouragement and speed zone reviews and resurfacing. Like whenever there's resurfacing, maybe that should trigger a speed study, or maybe for road dots or flush medians or crosswalks, things of that nature. Countermeasures should include even the business practices which initiate or activate these broader approaches to countermeasures and modifications or additions to the infrastructure. So whether it's policies, guidelines for operations, or design processes, or planning stage prompts or triggers, we need to identify, we need to pursue and seek out those opportunities to be part of a program process. So the various steps in the process are identifying the speeding issues, identifying the countermeasures, implementing those countermeasures, and then evaluating the program. So a simple 4-step process. But it's not necessarily so simple, because step 4, then you have to repeat periodically, go back to step 1. But even within step 1 and 2, it's how are you going to identify your speeding issues, and how are you going to identify your countermeasures? I think there has to be a subroutine over here, so to speak, where you have various guidelines and business practices that you're going to address, get stakeholder feedback, and then develop policies and guidelines for operations. And then that should feed back into how you're going to identify your countermeasures and your speeding related issues. There are a number of things that can trigger, I guess, if you will, a speed study or speed reevaluation or speed assessment of currently posted speeds. And we'll get into that in more detail in module 4. So what I want to do now is just get you to, if I could get Matt to post that link in the chat area. I'd like for you guys to give me a little feedback on who your employer is, why you're here, and what are some of your perceptions about setting speed limits, or how to go about setting a speed limit. So if you would just, it'll only take, there's about, I don't know, about 5 or 6 questions there, just real quickly run through that. And then I'm going to share the results and just kind of, glean through them. So if you would just, hopefully that link is in the chat area, and just feel free to go to that. And I'm going to pull up the responses here in just a moment. I didn't mention about breaks. We will be taking a break probably about midway through the morning or the session. So I'm thinking maybe around 11:15, 11:30, we'll take a break. So we won't be too far away from that here after we complete this, this survey and discuss it for a few minutes. So I'll be quiet and let you do that. And then I'll jump back in here in just a few minutes. All right, I've got 2 responses, 3, they're jumping in there now, okay. Yeah, it takes a few minutes to walk through that. Let's see. Matt or Ayrton, can I get confirmation you're seeing the survey?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and jump in here and just, I know there's still gonna be several coming in, but I just want to kind of jump in here and see what's falling out here, get some early trends, you know. We can get about 5 to 6% of the total votes cast, and we can go ahead and call the survey. So it looks like a big majority of you are from local government and our state DOT is pretty high as well. We have a few from regional government as well, and then a transportation user group or advocacy. Okay, that's good. We've got another. All right. We got a number of different employers represented, of course. This will be interesting here. Which best describes your duties? Most of you are coming from design. Okay, that's almost 2 to 1 over any other. That's interesting. Okay. Planning and analysis is, and then safety, and then we've got consultants, a big group of consultants, and we do have some elected officials. That's interesting. Good. No, I'm sorry, we don't have any election. That's maintenance and ops. Sorry about that. Sorry to say something bad about those elected officials, but all right. So this is good to know. Design, and then planning, analysis, and maintenance and ops folks are coming up. A neck is a horse race for the second place finish there. We have to come back and revisit that. Okay, why are you here today? A number of things. Look into that in a little more detail. I'm going to jump down here to speeding. Breakdown of where you speed and how often. So when it comes to residential streets, most of you are saying not at all. As far as yours, occasionally some of you are going to speed. That's interesting. And then a very small group of you said nearly every time you're going to speed on a residential street. Okay. Here's this. This is interesting, of course. I think it's no surprise based on the research we just looked at too, or summarized. There's in school zones, almost none of you are going to speed in a school zone, overwhelmingly. When it comes to how often, as far as major arterials, next highest group of where you're likely to speed is the major arterial, where it's 55 to 70 miles per hour common. So that's not unusual. I don't think these numbers here are all that unusual. If everybody's being honest, and it looks like we're overwhelmingly honest today, so that's a good thing. And then what's the which statement, this should be interesting, which statement below best describes your perspective on approaches to setting speed limits? So we've got a blended approach which considers speed distribution, context, roadside environment, etc. Got 43 votes. That's interesting. The 85th percentile speed should be a consideration along with other speed limit setting tools. Got the next largest chunk. And then the tried and true method, 7. That's surprising. I would have thought that would have been higher, but okay. All right, good information. A blended approach. That's have to hold on to that as we move forward. All right, what is your role or interest in Safe Speed for All users? Check all that apply. Most of you are either planning or doing design activities, I think, which is consistent with your role. And then conducting speed studies. A lot of you have conducted speed studies or are in the process of doing that. And then we have evaluating and recommending speed reductions or speed management treatments. Okay, that's good. And then this over here, selecting a design speed and specific geometric features. Okay, that's certainly related to the design aspect. All right, no real surprises there. Those are consistent with your roles and duties. And then we got 78 responses. What is your role in setting speed limits for a speed management program? And we got plan reviewers, guiding design or transportation projects, educator and advisor, conducting speed studies, reviewing signing plans, providing input, can recommend speed changes during project scoping. Okay. Reviewing speed data, signing and sealing speed studies, consulting engineer, coordinating with traffic office, local governments. There's a humble person, humble. All right, just little there. Advisory only, consulting, evaluating, improving designs. Currently have no role. Have to. Maybe that was a no. Okay. So a lot of varied responses here. Certainly not all of you. There's a pretty good sized group of you that are not directly involved in setting speed limits at all, and that's understandable. Not everyone is going to be a designer of roadways, but they're still going to, they're still going to be involved in speed management and in the speed problem. You may be a pedestrian advocate. You're not going to be setting speed limits, but you're still certainly involved and you're a stakeholder and a contributor to managing a speed program. So setting speed limits is a very small part of the overall process. It's an important part, just as the others are too, but it's not the only way to contribute to certainly the speed management program. And we'll talk a little bit more detail about really what is the overall effect of setting speed limits on driver behavior. Does it really impact the lower speed limit postings? Do they have an impact? Or what impact does higher speed limit postings have? All these things I think are important. All right, good. That kind of just gives me a sense of who's in the group today, and also the just some of your perspectives about different speed and speed related issues. Okay, let's go back over here. Oops. I want to come out of this. All right, bear with me here a moment. All right, what we're going to do now, we're going to get into the little bit of discussion about the safe speed approach using the safe system approach. So, safe systems approach is one of those. I guess it's kind of like a. I guess you call it maybe a paradigm shift again, if you will, in how we look at providing safety for all road users. and the best way to do that. And as Jessica went over the 6 different tenets of the safe systems approach, we're going to look at how you might kind of apply that using the safe systems approach framework for intersections. So in this module, what we're going to do, we're going to provide an overview of the safe systems, the origins and the tenets of the safe systems concepts, and provide an overview of applying the safe systems to intersection safety and also to speed reduction. So this is the safe systems for intersections framework. This is version 1, if you will. But in the framework, we're looking at 4 key components, and that is to simplify user decisions, to reduce or eliminate the severe conflicts, to manage the collision angles, and then to reduce the impact speeds. If we can accomplish or start to navigate toward these 4 key concepts and strategies, then we're gonna be making ground in terms of reducing the number of severe crashes and severe crashes and fatalities at intersections. So this applies just to intersections. There are other frameworks and assessments that will be coming along that will be addressing other portions of our roadways, whether it's segments or pedestrian facilities, whatever the case may be. Of course, in the safe system intersection framework, it does include assessment of crosswalk safety, et cetera. So the framework is it's an analytical method for assessing intersections, and there are certain required operational and geometric inputs, and there are other operational and geometric inputs that are can also be included. And we'll get into that in a little more detail. We're going to be using this as an overall blueprint, if you will, as we move through this particular session. So there was a full report that was published in January of 21. It was FHWA SA 21-008. And this report, you can download this report from the Office of Safety website. It's under the intersections webpage. So if you go to the safety website, just click on intersections, and then you can download this particular report. FHWA has also published a tech brief, which is the safe systems based framework and analytical method for assessing intersections. And this provides a higher level summary of the full report and of the safe systems for intersections, or SSI method. So the SSI method is really what we're talking about, really going to be spending the rest of our time on as far as this module, the SSI method. So as I said, this is version 1.0. It's still, it's not as, it's like, what was it? DOS disk operating system 1.0, and when it got to 3.3, or we had the DOS shell, we thought we were well advanced, but right now we're just at version 1.0 with regards to the safe system for intersection analysis. But this is it's the first iteration of the safe systems for intersections analysis method. It is to be developed and tested in context with ICE, or intersection control evaluation, which occurs at the scoping phase of the project development. ICE, if you're not familiar with ICE, ICE is, again, stands for intersection control evaluation, and it's a data-driven, performance-based framework. And the approach is used to objectively screen out or select alternatives and identify an optimal intersection control form and design related to what type of traffic control solution is going to be employed, what's going to be the optimal geometric design, those two things. There is a link. If you want more information on ICE, you can use this link. It'll take you to the safety page. And again, it's under the intersections the intersections page is where you will find the ICE, information on ICE. So this report contains ideas and possible extensions of the SSI method going to a stage 2 ICE, which would provide a more detailed process that coincides with the preferred alternative being selected. So basically, stage 1 is where you screen for different alternatives, and then stage 2 is when you go through the selection process. And once you've accomplished that, and you've essentially gone through the steps of ICE or intersection control evaluation. One of the key parts of the SSI score is really assessing your conflict types and your frequency of conflicts. So I'm sure most all of you are familiar with conflict points. It's potential crossing paths of either vehicles with other vehicles or vehicles with pedestrians. And it includes an exposure index, a severity index, and for both vehicle-vehicle conflict points or for 2 non-motorized conflict points. There is individual concepts are combined through the SSI score, and the SSI score can range anywhere from 0 to 100, with 100 representing a nearly safe system. Or in other words, there'd be a very, very low probability of a fatal or serious injury. Doesn't mean there wouldn't be a crash, but there would not be there'd be a very low probability of a fatality or a serious injury for users considered by this method. So when you think about, Vision Zero is not really aimed at reducing all crashes. It's aimed at reducing all severe injury and fatality crashes. So you would identify your conflict points and classification, whether or not they would be severe or not, and then look at your speeds and your exposure and your movement complexity. So this would be part of using your geometry and determining your number and types of conflicts. This shows the required operational inputs that are needed to form the safe systems for intersections analytical methodology. You would need your posted speed limit, your AADT, and then the number of through lanes in one direction on each approach. And then optional operational inputs would be your breakdown of your turning movements, your breakdown of your roundabout movements and speeds, and then your non-motorized AADT volumes, what's your directional split, and then turning movement proportions or turning movement AADTs. So a little more on conflicts. Intersection conflicts have different speeds and collision angles. That's kind of delving into the just your traditional analysis of conflict points, which has traditionally been either, we've categorized them as crossing, diverging, or merging conflict points. But this gets into a little more, I guess, specificity related to those 3 different types of conflicts. So we all know that crossing conflicts are the most problematic, and that they tend to be at closer to 90-degree angles in terms of the crashes. And then merging conflicts are when 2 vehicles are coming, from different paths into the same traffic stream, such as a freeway ramp or something of that nature, or even from a acceleration lane at a at-grade intersection. And then diverging is where the vehicles are separating in time and space, moving in the same direction to moving in different directions. And then the non-motorized conflict point is that which vehicle path where a pedestrian and cyclist path crosses. This shows, the graph on the right really shows as speed increases, then the kinetic energy that's dissipated at the time of a crash also increases. And as that angle increases, the kinetic energy is also increasing. So below in the graphic, you can see the less severe crashes are going to be occurring at those typically 30-degree or less angles. So these are going to be your merge and diverge type conflicts. And then these other from like 90, 120, 150, those tend to be the most severe of crash, and those are going to be the crossing, and then 180 would of course be your head-on type of conflict or crash. So if you were designing an intersection, you're looking at your number of conflict points. It's not a simple matter of looking at your number of conflict points, but it's your types of conflicts. That's why, such as with alternative intersections or roundabouts, for example, we're basically looking at 8 conflict points. If it's a four-leg roundabout, then you're looking at conflicts that are basically merge and diverge. So there are no crossing conflicts within a roundabout. That's to a large degree, and speeds of course lower too. That's why to a large degree roundabouts are so effective at reducing severe injury crashes and fatal crashes, because they're basically just merge, diverge conflict points. They're essentially, a roundabout is a right in, right out intersection. So some of the assumptions and limitations of this first version are that it does not consider rear end conflicts, and these often result from speed differentials at an intersection for various reasons. The deceleration or stopping due to the traffic control devices. So rear end conflicts are not included in this first version. And then it assumes also that bicycles are going to follow the same paths as pedestrians through the intersections, which is not necessarily a exactly real world all the time case scenario. So that, and then there are collision types where there's a summation, if you will, of the different collision types, whether it's crossing, merging, or diverging, and you have your left turn. For example, a left turn conflict, what would be your typical collision angle? It'll be anywhere from 220 degrees to 240 degrees. Roundabout, your crossing would be such as at maybe a multi-lane roundabout where you're going to have entries of maybe as much as 45, 60, or even up to 75 degrees. That would be a little bit high, but then your merge and diverge conflicts are going to be down there around 0 to 20 and 30 to 60. But if you wanted to look at your different speed categories, then the speed categories, the research shows that it doesn't, which the research that does exist, which is most for right turning movements, requires geometric inputs that are generally not available during an alternative screening stage. And so for that reason, the SSI method adopted a simplified set of speed assumptions to cover the different vehicle maneuvers at intersections. So those speed categories were in the full report, but the assumptions can be adjusted based on local knowledge of any data that would otherwise be available in the future. So this is part of the assumption process in far as determining the safe speed index, the safe systems index. You have different parameters. You have your traffic control parameter, your conflicting lanes, and your conflicting speed parameters. And the traffic control accounts for the complexity in certain movements that are separated in time by the type of traffic control, such as with, split, maybe split phasing, things of that nature. It can account for that. Conflicting lane parameters, it accounts for added complexity of larger intersections, additional scores for cross, merge, and total turns, and then for motorized and non-motorized traffic. And then the conflicting speed parameter counts for judging of different gaps under higher speeds. And this would include geometry as well, such as maybe from a stop controlled intersection, judging gaps for moving to across a 4-lane divided highway would also be accounted for. And then for your conflicting speed parameter, which is the third part of the complexity factor, this considers the aspect of the road user workload. When a road user is attempting to navigate an intersection, then the user has to judge the speed of the conflicting traffic, and when searching for a gap. So higher speeds of conflicting traffic increase the complexity of the task, and the conflicting vehicle speed for any movement is the highest speed of all the conflicting traffic streams, with the process used to identify the conflicting traffic streams previously discussed. So since this is a relative adjustment, arbitrarily setting the speed of 60 miles per hour, for example, is a conflicting speed parameter of 1, and applying that relationship results in the equation on the screen for the conflicting speed parameter, A sub conflicting speed, where V sub C is the conflicting vehicle speed, and this value of A conflicting speed is applied when computing the conflicting traffic complexity factor for the individual crossing, merging, or non-motorized conflict points movements, conflict points associated with that movement. So deriving an SSI score, each conflict point has an exposure index, severity, and 1 for vehicle conflict points, and then 2 for non-motorized vehicle conflict points. So you have to bring those two together. And then the individual concepts are combined to an SSI score, and the score ranges from 0 to 100, 100 representing a near safe system intersection. And finally, you get to the summation, where you compute the sum of the exposure, severity, complexity products for all the individual conflict points for a specific type, E sub T, and this is done for all the 4 conflicting conflict point types: the E sub crossing, E sub merging, and E diverging, and then the E sub non-motorized, would be the summation of all those conflict point types. So in summary, and a little bit about future expansion, the U.S. intersection planning and design practices have incorporated some of the state systems principles to the extent over the last several decades. The work still remains to be done. The SSI method was developed through this project, and it provides an approach to characterizing intersection alternatives with respect to the safe systems principle. The safe systems intersection methodology is sensitive to volumes, vehicle speeds, the potential collision angles, and the intersection geometry. The results of applying the SSI method include multiple measures of effectiveness and a set of SSI scores that can serve as a safety metric to aiding in the selection of different intersection control forms and geometries, going back to the ICE process. That's a lot. That's a lot to take in, and there are some agencies that I know are using this. I'm not sure what Tennessee's status is in terms of using safe systems approach, building this framework into their design process, but certainly it's an opportunity to combine, if you already have an ICE policy in place and a well-defined program for using intersection control evaluation, then the safe systems can be more easily applied, I think, with this intersection approach. So with that, I've got 11:15. I think it'd be a good point for us to take a short break. If you have any questions, you can throw those in the chat pod, and I'm going to call call for a 10-minute break. So we will reconvene at 11:25, and we're going to jump into laying some foundations for engineering terms and looking at some of the engineering concepts related to speed and choice of speed. All right, so we're on a 10-minute break. Okay, I have 11:30 Eastern time, and we're going to get started back up. So hopefully that gave you a little chance to catch your breath and get something to drink. And we're going to run here into module 3. We're going to start talking about engineering terms and more related to engineering. Now, I'll have to confess up front, by background, and I'm not a design engineer. There are a lot of things that I know enough kind of to be somewhat dangerous, I guess, if you will, about design. But my background is in operations in terms of traffic and traffic engineering. So I come at this from the perspective as kind of a, not necessarily, well, maintenance, I guess, and operations. Those two are so closely combined in so many of the activities that are part of the DOTs, and my experience has been with background. My background as far as traffic engineering kind of was commenced at state DOT. So just a little bit of, I guess, information there to, as we go through this, keep in mind. If you have questions about this particular, as we get into some of these terms and definitions, then feel free to ask them. This whole area of different speed terminology is a course in itself, if you will. We're going to cover some of the key terms and definitions because we need those as we move forward in trying to understand the whole concept of reasonable and enforceable speed limits, self-enforcing speed limits. And there's some new terms also that we'll be looking at. So we're going to talk about how speed is considered in roadway design. And we're going to contrast, which is seemingly two different camps of design speed rules versus operating speed rules as far as setting reasonably safe speeds. We're going to talk about also some of the basic speed terms as well. So I think I've already presented this. I'm not sure why it's coming up again, but I need to take that out. Okay, so as far as the legal framework of speed, there is a basic rule which it just says no person shall travel or drive at a speed greater than is reasonable and prudent under the conditions. So in absence of anything else, you can still be ticketed for violating this basic rule that you were driving too fast for conditions. As far as statutory speeds, that deals with the absolute or the prima facie evidence, if you will, that there are statutory speed limits that are enacted and passed through state legislatures for various speeds. Now, typically a state will delegate or authorize a local community or local town, city, or county to modify those speeds, whatever those state statutory speeds are. And in some cases, that's limited to certain routes, or whether they're maybe a state route that passes through a municipality or city, whatever, or it could be a situation where there is their own roads, the local roads are maintained and by the local government, then they have authority over those. So typically, all that's going to be covered as part of the legislation that's in the code for that particular state. Speed zones are, for the most part, they're going to be required by an engineering study. So by saying that, I'm referring back to the MUTCD, and most state laws are going to require, or through a promulgated rule based on the statute, a state is going to require an engineering study before any speed limit is modified from the statutory limit. So A speed zone would be in effect whenever there is a engineering study, there's been a process that's gone through, and there's been approval by various authorities for that particular speed zone or speed reduction. That's different from the statutory speed. So if you're riding down the road and you see a speed limit sign, unless you're familiar with the state laws, you really don't know whether or not that's the statutory speed or it's a actual speed zone, which it's a modification, if you will, of the statutory speed, or variance, if you will, from the statutory speed, which has been whoever is authorized to maintain and set speed limits on that particular roadway has been granted. Speeding is just considered to be driving too fast for conditions where you're over the speed limit, whether it's 1 mile per hour, or it's 10 miles per hour, or it's 15, whatever the case may be, or you're driving too fast for conditions, then that can also be classified as speeding, regardless of the speed. If it's too fast for conditions, regardless of the speed, it can be classified as speeding. Target speed is somewhat of a new term. There's a research report that came out that dealt with this whole concept of target speed, but it's the intended operating speed for drivers on a given roadway. The target speed, the research was primarily centered around urban areas where this whole concept of target speed was used. So higher speed roadways and roads outside of an urban area have really not yet been addressed in terms of how target speed would be, what methodology or procedure you would use to arrive at a target speed for those outside of urban areas. So there are different speed types. When you're thinking about design speed is somewhat of a, it's different from some of the other speeds we just talked about in that it's not a actual speed limit. It's a selected value, comes from a range of values, and then the whole design speed is to essentially allow you to use a set of certain various geometric design features to include on a particular roadway based on that design speed. So based on the design speed that is chosen, you have essentially a pool of features or treatments that can be used along a section of roadway based on that selected design speed. So we'll talk about that in a little more detail and contrast it with the other speeds, such as operating speed as well, which is here. Operating speed is it's an observed free flow condition of speed. So it's a measured actual speed of traffic, whereas design speed it's not a observed free flow speed. It is again a catalog, if you will, of the different roadway features that can be included as part of a roadway project. The posted speed limit can either be, as I said earlier, can either be a legislated, statutorily set, or an administratively modified maximum value. So again, the posted speed limit could be, if it's a regulatory speed, we're not talking about warning signs here, we're talking about a regulatory speeds that are enforceable. It can be the statutory speed, or it can be a altered speed based on the authority that's granted to that particular jurisdiction or to the state to modify that speed. In some cases, if you're going to do a speed zone on a state road, if let's say the maximum speed limit is 55 miles per hour on a two-lane, two-way roadway in your state, if a speed is going to be reduced by the state DOT to a lower limit, something less than 55 miles per hour, then typically that has to be authorized or signed off on by either the transportation director, the commissioners, the state police. A lot of times have to sign off on it as well. state public safety. It just depends, from state to state who actually has to sign off on that speed reduction. But it's common practice that it is at least the DOT and the public safety department. That's not always the case. Not sure, exactly what, from which state you're in and how that would be. You have to just go back to the law and see. Just again, the design speed is selected speed. One thing about the design speed is it leans toward, actually the Green Book actually leans toward choosing a minimum speed that's designated for coordinating the different roadway elements, as opposed to trending toward a higher speed. The Green Book actually, not sure exactly what the word is, recommends or moves you toward choosing a minimum speed versus a higher speed. The stopping sight distance and curve sharpness are directly related to the design speed. And then it's also, the design speed is based on comfort and worst case conditions. So some subjectivity there as far as selection of a design speed. Presently, the Green Book includes things such as what's the functional class of the roadway going to be, or what is the functional class of roadway? Is it going to be changed if it's a modification to a project or widening or something like that? What's the alignment? What's the stopping sight distance? All these things would come into play in terms of selecting an appropriate design speed. Other things such as land use, roadside environment, and roadside design, clear zone, all those things would also play a part in selection of a design speed. So it's my understanding the next edition of the Green Book is going to have some significant changes in it, just as this past one did, past edition, but these different classes of roadways, I think from what I've heard, are going to be done away with, and looking at more of a target type of speed approach, which again is the blending of the intended speed for that particular roadway. I want to share a video with you here, and so this is about a 4 or 5 minute video on Stroads. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but this is, I think, very relevant to what we're discussing here.
In this country, we're having a huge debate over transportation spending. How do we find more money to continue to do the things that we currently do? We actually need to be having a conversation about how to do things differently, how to take the money we have already invested and get better use out of it. If you're traveling more than 20 miles an hour and less than 50 miles an hour, you are on a Stroad. A Stroad tries to do two things at once and does neither of them well. It tries to be both street and road. What's the difference? A road we can think of as a replacement of the railroad, which of course is a road on rails. And in a railroad, you would get on at one spot and you would get off at another. And there's a high-speed connection between the two. We want people to get from one place to another as quickly as possible. We widen out the lanes, we put in sweeping, forgiving geometries. We're trying to move people from one productive place to another productive place. When we build roadways to serve as high-speed connections, when we don't encumber them with accesses and turnoffs and interchanges, what we see is that we can make very cost-effective investments and move a lot of people very, very quickly. What is a street then? A street is, and always has been, a platform for building wealth. It's a platform for creating value within a place. As an engineer, we design streets by the foot. And what we're looking for from a financial standpoint is how much return do we get per foot that we put in. In a really good street environment, what we see is that the design is actually narrower streets, wider sidewalks. It's designed for people. It's designed for people to freely flow back and forth. You're gonna have sidewalks, you're gonna have good spacing, you're gonna have slow traffic, you're gonna have on-street parking, you're gonna have the ability of people to safely move from place to place in that environment. We can effectively build wealth-creating streets where we embrace the complexity and we work with it to incrementally improve the place over time with the budgets that our cities have. The problem comes when we try to do both, when we try to both move traffic quickly and create wealth. In those environments, we wind up with a strode. When you get into a strode environment, you get these signs that are out of scale. When you're driving along, they're actually not big enough to work for you, but when you're walking along, they're way too big, they're way out of scale. Stroads are incredibly expensive to build. Extra lanes, extra wide lanes, an attempt to essentially build highway-style roadways in places where we don't expect highway-style speeds. We put in traffic signals, we put in stop signs, we put in things that slow you down. Beyond that, they're not safe. So even though we've invested a lot of money to move cars quickly, nobody moves very quickly. These are incredibly expensive places to build, and the return we get for that investment is very low. As a nation, what we need to do is forget about trying to create a whole bunch more money to continue building what we've already shown doesn't work. We have to actually have a dialogue about how we take our existing stroads and convert them to either wealth-creating streets or high-performance roadways. Roadways that connect our places, places that build wealth and value. If we can do that, we can spend less, we can get more. That's a strong towns approach.
Okay. All right, let's keep talking about design speed a little bit. This is from actually a couple of editions back. So this is dated. I don't know that it changed in the latest edition of the Green Book. But from this, you can see that you're choosing a design speed is somewhat subjective in that there's a range of these different speeds. So let's say you're looking for a collector. You're going to build a collector, which is basically takes goods and services and people from residential areas onto moves them toward minor arterials and things of that nature. So it's kind of an in-between type of roadway, if you will. Depending on the terrain type, whether it's level, rolling, or mountainous, you can see there's a range here. If you're talking about a rural collector versus an urban collector. But for rural collectors, it can be anywhere from 40 to 60 for design speed, 30 to 50 on rolling terrain. Mountainous terrain would be 20 to 40. And then for urban roads, greater than or equal to 30 in terms of the design speed. So this illustrates, I think, in a good way, the wide range of permissible design speeds that can be chosen for various roadways, depending on these different conditions or factors, but also on the type of geometric features that you would want to be included or infrastructure along the roadway, whether it's curb and gutter, paved shoulders, typical sections, slopes, things of that nature are all going to have proximity of fixed objects, clear zone. All those things can have an impact on the design speed that is chosen. So as far as target speeds, there is a difference in looking at selecting a target speed. For example, let's look at collectors again. Rural collectors, 30 to 45 miles per hour would be a suggested target speed. Again, you do have a range, and you have these different, 5 different, basically, contexts would be rural town, suburban, urban, and urban core. So this comes from the something from the 966 report, and again shows you that range and the flexibility of choosing a varied design speed. Again, in contrast to an observed free flow speed on an existing roadway. The effects of speed on crash avoidance can be pretty amazing when you think about it. The reaction and braking distance at higher speeds, it equates to greater reaction and stopping distance. And this grows in terms of the speed. The increase in speed has a multiple effect on the reaction or braking distance. got another video here for you. If you've seen this before, I know for me, each time I watch this, it just has strikes a chord again with me in terms of just the incremental difference in speed and what that can have in terms of crash avoidance or crash severity.
Hi, I'm Ray Bowles from Prattville Carpet. If you're looking for waterproof carpet, hardwood, laminate, vinyl plank, or ceramic tile, call us.
What you're about to see will change your mind about speeding. Two identical cars, one travelling at 60, the other at 65. A sudden change in the road ahead, and both drivers first react, and then, a moment later, they brake. And things start to get interesting. Down here, the difference is extraordinary. In the last 5 metres of braking, you wipe off half your speed. So this car is still doing 32 k's when it hits. This one also hits, but only at 5 k's. So no matter how good a driver you are, 5 k's difference up there makes 27 k's difference down here.
Okay. I don't know if you've ever seen that video before, but to me, that's a powerful video and illustrates how a difference of 3 miles per hour can have an impact on the severity of a crash, such as that. So keep in mind that small changes and reductions in speed can pay big dividends in terms of crash severity. What I'd like for you to do now is use a little tool. This is the Omni Calculator to see with this given scenario, which I'm going to provide for you in the Microsoft Forms link, and see if you can safely avoid the crash. So if you, if I could get Matt or someone to post that in the chat area, that would be great. And then this will take you to, within the Microsoft Forms, you'll have the opportunity to go into this Omni Calculator and input your values. So it should be self-explanatory in the, once you get into Microsoft Forms. And I'm going to check that, make sure. So if you would, just go to the link there in Microsoft Forms there that's in the chat area and see if you can solve that, that question about whether or not you can avoid a crash. And there's a couple of questions there for you to answer. All right, just going to give you another minute or so on this. Don't over-engineer it. I'm sure there's some assumptions in here I probably didn't provide. So just make some of those on your own, and you can, I guess, state them as needed. All right, we're getting quite a few responses in, so I'm going to go ahead and let's look at them. Okay. So for those using a perception reaction time 1.5, it is crash avoided. No. Crash avoided 2.5. Yes. Okay, keep the same PRT. You adjust your speed by the following amounts. Can you avoid the crash? All right, we got a -5 speed reduction of yes, and -10 speed reduction of yes. All right, let's look at what do these calculations tell you about the importance of speed upon intersection crashes? Let's see. All right, speed can account for, or speed can adjust for PRT. Slower speeds allow for crash avoidance. Speed can significant impact on crash. Yep. Plays a major role because you're avoiding crash. Yep. 2.5 is generally considered the design perception reaction time. Yep, that's true. 5 miles per hour can help. Helps remember to slow down. Slowing down. Yep. Yep. This is all something we know. I guess the question is that just because of the circles we run in? Is this knowledgeable to the average layperson? And is this something that needs to be communicated to those as part of an education, campaign? I mean, this is all, velocity squared, all of that comes into play. It's kind of mind-boggling, but to the layperson, it would be, I think, somewhat of a surprise that it has that much of an impact. So, yep. All right. So let's contrast these two different speeds. Design speed can be considered a starting place or a variable. It can be considered something that you actually select or choose based on various factors. It represents a set of roadway features that's commensurate with the roadway purpose. The selection of a speed often trends toward the lower range value, which is just, again, from the Green Book. Desirable roadway features often dictate a speed chosen. So if you want certain features, then it's going to force you into choosing certain design speeds. Versus operating speed is actually a field measurement. It's an observed speed. It's a snapshot. It's a point in time. It can be described by different, by an average or 85th or 75th, however you want to describe it, as far as the the distribution of the speeds. It can indicate an upper and lower range of a safe speed. That's just based on research, whether it's 85, 75, whatever you're going to use. It can also be used in terms of violations and citations and penalties. If the operating speed is close to or within 5 miles per hour of the operating speed, then you can use that in terms of citations and penalties. So it's a legally can be a legally enforceable value compared to post or statutory speed limits enforcement. So that's kind of I guess a contrast, if you will, between design speed and operating speed. Now, some will say that depending on kind of your maybe your perspective, design speed is a good predictor of operating speed, or design speed should be, a road should not be posted higher than the design speed. And there are various arguments that can be made for or against that position. There are those who would say the operating speed should be the measure or the standard by which the speed limit will be set and not the design speed. And so there are sometimes, this can be a point of contention in trying to bring groups together to arrive at a reasonable and self-enforcing speed. And I think that's one of the goals or targets of the target speed, is to actually bring the two together into achieving a safe outcome or safer outcome for the road users. I'll just let you read this. I thought this is some very good information that came out of the 966 report. So I'm just gonna let you read that. Okay, all right. So I thought it was interesting. I was doing some looking and at some of the Tennessee rules and regs, and then also the on the guidance on setting speed limits. Well, this information comes from a source on the guidance of setting speed limits, and also from research listed here, guidelines for selecting reasonable speed limits, etc. But there was a problem that was addressed by the Tennessee DOT, and this is an example of problems arising when there's an attempt to use design speed for speed zoning. This was on the issue of curb and gutter. The Green Book recommended that the curb and gutter or vertical face should be used on only be used on lower speed roadways. Green Book also encourages use of lower design speeds where ranges are suggested. This can lead to potential conflict where curb and gutter is desired, but design speed ceiling is around 40 to 40 miles per hour for such geometric features. So Tennessee, I think, made a good move when they addressed this by developing a policy in 2013 for when curb and gutter would be allowed on roadways with design speeds above 45 miles per hour. So I think they were wise to see this potential dichotomy or conflict between these two principles, and they addressed that when they made a variance for an allowance for when the curb and gutter could be used on projects where the design speed was higher than 45 miles per hour. So typically that is a limiting factor on the use of the curb and gutter for those speeds. So I think that's one good way of attempting to bring the two together to arrive at a uniform and safe approach to dealing with speeds and features along the roadway. So they're to be commended for that. I thought that was very good. All right, so that wraps us up on just some basic engineering terms as we move forward. What I'd like to do now is to go into the next module, and hopefully we'll make some headway into this, and we can so next we're going to be looking at some laws, some specific Tennessee laws, and some ways that different states go about setting their speed limits. So what we want to cover in this particular module is we'll talk about how speed zone inquiries are typically initiated, explain how to establish reasonable and appropriate speed limits, and then understand the safety rationale for those limits, and identify steps in the process and roles in the task. So again, speed zone And speed reduction, speed setting is a important part of the overall picture. It's not the entire picture by any stretch, but it does play an important role. And I think each of us, no matter what area we work in, needs to understand the complexity and some of the studies that go into determining a safe speed. So who is responsible for the various roads and streets? Now, this, I'll have to throw in a little caveat here, I guess, if you will, or disclaimer. This is based on my understanding of the Tennessee law. I'm not a lawyer, don't pretend to be, but as I understand, this is the way it is in Tennessee. So if anybody from TNDOT wants to throw a plug or something, or something into the chat area, that's either a rant or a rave or whatever, feel free to do that. Interstate highways, TNDOT controls the speeds in any jurisdiction across the state. All state roads outside of municipal boundaries, TNDOT controls those speeds. So for state highways or roads that traverse within municipal boundaries, local governments who desire and have the capability of addressing those speeds, performing the speed studies, et cetera, they can change those speeds or conduct or have a speed zone, a reduction in speed on those roads as approved by TNDOT. And this comes from the guidance that is available. And this is it's the different, I'm sorry, not the guidance is available. I was getting ahead of myself. This is the Tennessee code and the different sections of the code where this information comes from. State highways or roads that traverse within the municipal boundaries where locals do not wish or where they don't want to have anything to do with the speed limits, then those, of course, would be under TNDOT control. For non-state streets and roads within the jurisdiction of localities, the localities have control over those speeds. And for school zone speeds, the local government controls that, unless it falls back under, I think, one of these areas where it's under state control if the locals don't choose to do so, and there's a safety or a need to do that. And again, that's where these are referenced. So if you look at the statutory speeds, it's 70 for any controlled access highway with 4 more lanes. It's 65 miles per hour for all state roads outside of municipal boundaries, and 55 for all non-state, non-interstate roads, which would include local roads and streets. And for school speed zone, 15 miles per hour or greater. I think up to, not sure what the ceiling on that is. I left that out, but I think that's covered under special speed limits. But anyway, the references for those are here. So what are the factors that influence drivers' choice of speed? There are different components. There's the weather component. So if you're thinking about, if you head out in the morning or you drive home this afternoon, you're going to be faced with decisions to make about how fast you're going to drive. So there's going to be a vehicle component. You know, you're driving a sports car, or you're driving a old truck, are you driving a semi tractor trailer? What is your vehicle type? What's the weather like? And then the driver, what's the experience of the driver? What's the, tends to be is it an aggressive driver? Is it a passive driver? What's the driver's general mode of driving? And then there's the design and physical features that impact the design speed choice. That may be like proximity of fixed objects to the roadway, the width of the lanes, etc. All of these add to a speed choice. So there are various factors that influence the driver's choice of speed. These are things such as the vertical and horizontal curves, the driveways, number of driveways, pedestrian activity around the proximity to the roadway. the area type and the surroundings. What's the typical section? Are there shoulders or are there curb and gutter with not much recovery area? Is there generous recovery area and clear zone, lane width, turn lane presence? All these things enter into choice of speed. And this information comes from the 10-dot guidance on setting speed limits. Also, as far as the different parameters are to be considered based on the 10-dot guidance, it has to be an engineering study and it has to include the 85th percentile speed. There are considerations of other factors that are certainly to be included. The 3-year crash data should be part of that study, and then the distinct geometric conditions, whether it's driveway density, pet activity, etc., and then the enforcement level. I guess this would relate to the different municipalities, whether it's an area that's monitored closely by either state police or local authorities. What's been the history in terms of crashes and enforcement level? That could still have some impact on determining a speed limit. Outside requests for change are initiated with the 10-dot regional traffic engineer. I think that's fairly customary. It starts at the field level and then works its way up to the central office or headquarters for review and approvals. Additional guidance on setting speed limits for 10-dot is the posted speed should not be lower than the 50th percentile speed. You should factor in both upstream and downstream speed limits, and you should have no more than a 10-mile-per-hour change. And it could be that you have to artificially put in a 10-mile-per-hour change if if you're not setting speed, if your length of the section is not that long. This says that if it's if it's over 40 miles per hour, then you should have a zone greater than a half mile. If it's less than 40 miles per hour, then it's okay to have a quarter mile zone. Again, this is additional guidance which is provided by 10-dot related to setting of speed limits. I think it's good that they have this guidance. That's not always the case with state DOTs that they provide this guidance. So then, if they're 85th percentile, they may say, okay, we're going to use 85th percentile, be within 5 miles per hour of it, and you can do other factors, and then you would submit the study, or they just strictly follow what's in the MUTCD. I've already covered that. Let's see. So I guess just a kind of a sampling of how it would run through. You got an observed problem, or something is experienced, or somehow the information becomes knowledgeable to someone. Then there's typically a complaint either to a public servant, maybe directly to the DOT, could come into the elected, some type of elected official's office, and then they in turn would contact the 10-dot. I mean, it may be a local government contacting 10-dot. It could be a letter that's written to the 10-dot, commission, or the administration within 10-dot, directly from a elected official to, to conduct a speed study or to lower the speed limit. It may not be any, question marks about it. They just say this speed needs to be lowered, and, may want it done right away. Then 10-dot would proceed with the request, and then the study would be initiated based on the guidance and principles. The speed limit will be determined, and then approvals would be sought. Oftentimes, if it is a situation where it's a state route running through a municipality, and the municipality doesn't want to, be involved in the setting of speed limits, they've kind of opted out, so to speak, then there would still sometimes be some approvals, or not approvals, but at least some coordination and some knowledge made of the speed that's to be posted to the local stakeholders if they want to, weigh in. Just out of good relations with your local governments. And then an ordinance or state speed zone documents would be drafted. Those documents would be executed, then the signs would be fabricated and posted for local state by locals or the state. So that's not intended to be a a line by line description of necessarily how it works in Tennessee, but this is a general overview of how this process would work. So there could be little, tweaks and things about it, and that's understandable. But as a general rule, this is kind of how the lay of the land would look like. So what are some other things that should be considered? How do you identify speed-related problems? There are a number of ways to identify problems, and many of you are aware of this. Crash records, complaints, road conditions. As pavement starts to deteriorate, there can be concerns. Small things can sometimes lead to big problems. Bridge ends can be problems on the bridge slab, approaches to bridge slabs as pavement starts to give way. Those can lead to complaints. Pavement condition, wet weather crashes, those things can also drive new roadways. Partner agencies, those that you partner with, other stakeholders can, inform you about additional problems that are occurring. And there are other things too. The other thing to think about is, can speed limits be set based on forward or future or coming conditions? If you're going to use operating speed, does it have to be the operating speed, the snapshot you take today, or when you consider other factors and considerations, could that possibly affect the overall speed limit once it's determined based on those future or coming conditions, so to speak? So there are some other things you can ask questions when determining what site-specific factors would come into play. Has the speed limit been set in accordance with accepted procedures? Did the selected procedure consider all users from a complete streets perspective, such as vulnerable users? What about pedestrians and bicyclists and slower vehicles such as farm equipment? Were all these things considered? Freight, delivery. If you're in an urban core, did you consider, freight and delivery, maybe clogging maybe a parking area or a bike lane or a through lane? Were all these things considered as part of your speed-related, your speed setting and your determination of conducting speed studies? What about, as I said, what about conditions that are being encountered, such as there's new or proposed development in an area, or perhaps there's a change in the geometry of the roadway? Would that potentially trigger a speed study or speed investigation? Are motorists provided with sufficient information regarding an unexpected condition? In other words, is it adequate to when you're posting speed limit signs, how you're posting them, where you're posting them? Are they provided with all the information they need related to the change in speed limit? So you may have an area where you're transition from very few pedestrians to a high number of pedestrians. And so how is that communicated to the motorists? Should it be done with a decrease in speed, or should it be done with warning signs or through other means? Are there any engineering deficiencies in the roadway or roadside, such as inadequate pavement, marking, or signing, that could be contributing to the problem? All those things would need to be considered. These other considerations would be, as I mentioned, changes in roadside environment. There are, I think, a couple ways to look at this. One that can be overnight. Let's say you had a project where you had maybe a 2-lane converting to a 4-lane, or maybe you had a 4-lane highway that's going to be, you're adding lanes to 6 lanes, and all of that section of roadway is under construction. You may have various detours, reductions in speed, or whatever, but then overnight that project opens and you've got new speed signs in place. Well, the expected time of that particular project's completion, should there be speed studies and investigations into the appropriate speed limit that can be adjusted overnight, Or do you have to wait until the project, opens, roadway, you have traffic on it, and then you wait 6 months or whatever, and then you perform a traditional speed study? Which way do you go there? Should there be guidance about that? And then rapid development. Some parts of cities are going through rapid change and development where maybe old residential areas are being bought up and maybe converted into businesses, or maybe it's the residences, the structures are there and families are moving back into the area where it may have been a depressed area. Perhaps there are major developments that come in that happen over a year or two time frame, and those type of areas should be considered for speed limit changes or speed evaluation for needed change. So they can be, I think, can be a leading indicators, if you will, of a safe speed. And then what's the frequency of speed studies that should be used? Well, maybe on problem roadway sections where there's a high crash rate. How often should you consider speed evaluations on roads such as that? Or on roads where you're seeing a slow or moderate increase in the number of pedestrian activity, bicyclists, addition of bike lanes, should that trigger a study? What about use of the 50th percentile? TNDOT's guidance says you should use no less than 50th percentile. But when would 50th percentile be advisable? And would those other factors tend to move you closer to the 50th rather than the 85th? What options can be considered in the 50th percentile? What would be considered a reasonably safe speed? And then the maximum advisable change should be TNDOT uses 10 miles per hour, which I think is a good level of change. And then what about the length of zones? They use a half mile and a quarter mile, as I stated earlier. And then you have to be careful of transition areas where you have high-speed traffic, say a freeway. You have exits, and then you're dumping traffic from a freeway an exit ramp onto maybe a 3-lane section of a minor arterial. If motorists are used to traveling 70 miles per hour for, an hour or two, then there's this human factors says that those same tendencies are going to be true even when they exit. So what additional warning should be in place for these sections of transition areas? Should there be oversized signs? Should there be more frequent studies? Should there be design features that are incorporated into those minor arterials that will trend toward or lead motorists to select a lower speed? Then public acceptance is always a big factor, and then political expectations. Oftentimes, requests come in or letters come in where there's not much patience or on as far as how things are going to proceed. So political expectations and public acceptance certainly have to be dealt with and should gravitate toward using reasonably enforceable speed limit, reasonable and prudent speeds, and also enforceable and self-enforcing speed limits. This comes from, well, it's taken from the 966 report, but it just talks about the different speed limits and what those minimum lengths should be. And these are fairly consistent with what TNDOT's using. The 0.4 miles, I think, was 0.5, and then the quarter mile was under that. So yeah, anywhere up to, and this is even saying once you get 70 miles per hour, minimum length should be about 6 miles. I know that's not commonplace in many parts of the country to have that long of a speed zone before of a change on a freeway or denied access facility where it's a 70 mile per hour speed. So just some information there for you. We all know that speed increases the chance of serious injury and death, particularly for pedestrians. If you're struck at a car going 40 miles per hour, you have about a 1 in 10 chance of surviving that crash. Versus if your vehicle is going 20 miles per hour, then you have about a 15% chance of being killed or seriously injured. Let's see. I think this would probably be this case study. I'm gonna defer this and put this off until tomorrow. But this is a case study. I'll just give you a brief introduction into it, and then we'll do the problem solving tomorrow when we come back first thing. But this is in an area of northwest Alabama. It's called the Quad Cities, Sheffield, Muscle Shoals, Tuscumbia, and Florence, to give it the name the Quad Cities. And this involves a river crossing. I'm not sure that exactly when this project was completed, but back in the, I guess, early 90s, there was essentially 2 river crossings that joined these cities together. One was on US 72 and the other was on Wilson Dam Road, which went across the old, still in place Wilson Dam. So anyone wanting to go north or south across the Tennessee River had to use either 72 or Wilson Dam Road. Now this shows the new alignment of the roadway we're going to be focusing on, and that is Alabama 157, which shows this new alignment. But this is the new river crossing that was added. So this particular roadway, let's see, I got something out of kilter here. Okay. All right, this is the Google Earth view of the Wilson Dam Road in Muscle Shoals. You can see 2-lane, 2-way roadway, narrow shoulders, plenty of clear zone. I think the speed limit on this roadway was 45 miles per hour. This is traveling east toward the Wilson Dam. And had a little curve. I'm not sure what happened to the curve warning sign, but anyway, advisory speed 50 miles per hour around this curve. And then you had the getting on to the Wilson Dam. I think the travel lanes were about maybe 9 feet, maybe an 8.5. Not sure exactly what they were, but it's pretty narrow across there. So let me give you some particulars about this. Let's see. The new roadway, this shows Wilson Dam Road in red, the dotted red line. This navy blue line shows Alabama 157 are the new routes that replaced, or didn't replace, but added to the for traffic going over the Tennessee River. So the roadway consisted of 6 to 7 lanes, and some portions had a 2-way left turn lane. Some portions had a median. It was a major arterial to the river crossing. Curb and gutter was used in some sections. There was paved shoulder 8 foot outside in the sections where there was no curb and gutter, and 4 foot inside. Projected ADT was about 15,000 per day at opening, and about 2028 with 22,000 per day. Trucks about 2%. And some at grade and some grade separated intersections. So what I'm going to ask you to do when we come back tomorrow, I'm going to let you jump in there and determine what you think would be the best likely design speed for this roadway. And then we're going to look at what actually occurred in terms of the decision for a design speed. So with that, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to ask Matt if he would jump back in here, and if there's any thing he needs to give directions on about tomorrow.
All right, thanks, Jim. So just real briefly, tomorrow's session, we'll use the same Zoom link. So we'll be sending another email out, and sounds like you're going to get us the materials for tomorrow sometime later today or in the morning. So there will be another at least one more email going out with that information to everybody. Same time as well. So we'll be back at 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central. I don't know if we've got anybody further west than that. That covers probably 95% of the audience, regardless. But other than that, I think that's probably what everybody needs to know. Would say if for any reason you haven't already signed in the chat box, there's no need to sign out. But if you have not signed in, I guess this is your last call, last opportunity to do that today. Otherwise, I think, Ayrton, unless you have anything to add there, we'll just let everybody know that I think you've met your obligation for today. Made it to the end. I haven't seen any questions that we haven't already addressed. But Ayrton, I don't know if you've had any direct messages there. Maybe something that we want to bring up now. Otherwise, I think we'll scan everything again before we close down today and make sure that that everybody's had a chance to have their question heard and get a response.
Yeah, just we had a question there regarding where to sign in. Just use the chat box. Just go to the chat box and sign in. Just a reminder, those of you that are using JJ numbers from TDOT, please make sure you put your names in there. If you have a group on a office or a classroom or something, just make sure you put everybody's name in there so we can provide you the certificate.
All right. Well, thanks, Tim. Great session today. Look forward to seeing you wrap things up tomorrow, and hope to see all of you again tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right, Matt, I'm going to stop the recording here.
Sounds good.